My name is Katie Plass, and this is my presentation for the love of food, why I support genetic modification. Currently, as a society, we are facing two serious dilemmas. One, how do we produce and distribute enough nutritious food to eliminate world hunger and malnutrition? And two, how do we do this while simultaneously decreasing the negative impact the agriculture and livestock industries have on our planet and the environment? I believe genetic modification is key to addressing our global food crisis. I believe as a society, we are confusing natural with good for nature, while vilifying a branch of science that may hold the key to meeting our food production needs and doing so in an environmentally safe way. Pamela Rowland, a geneticist who works with food, agrees. While she often shocks people that she is married to an organic farmer, she likes to point out that their missions are aligned. We want to nourish the planet without further destroying the environment, she explains. While genetically manipulating the genes of plants and animals may seem extreme, I believe the times demand it. Currently, some 795 million people in the world do not have enough food to lead a healthy, active life. That's about 1 in 9 people on Earth. Poor nutrition causes nearly half, 45%, of deaths in children under the age of 5, and 3.1 million children die each year from malnutrition. While we may have objections to GMOs while wandering the overstocked aisles of our local grocery store, we may be less picky when reminded that even in developed countries, 1 out of 6 children, roughly 100 million, is underweight due to insufficient nutrition. Sadly, it may only get worse. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that the world will have to grow 70% more food by 2050 just to keep up with the population growth. I believe GMOs are uniquely qualified to help us meet this demand. For example, a group of scientists working with rice have developed strains that are resistant to pest and disease, which destroys nearly 40% of the crop globally every year. First, in the late 1990s, scientists uncovered the genetic reason a certain family of rice strains were especially resistant to disease. However, these strains were significantly lower yielding strains, making them inefficient to plant and harvest. However, one of the genetic bases for resistance was identified. Scientists were able to engineer the genes into conventional high-yield rice variety that's normally susceptible, thus making a high-yield plant that was disease-resistant. This, in turn, eliminated the need for farms to spend money and be exposed to the hazardous chemicals which had traditionally been used, which had been tied to a number of health issues, including cancers. Genetic modification can also help make crops more nutritious. For example, the Rockefeller Foundation supported scientists in developing a golden rice that had been enriched with beta-carotene, the pigment found in carrots. This wasn't done so that first world consumers could have pretty carrot-flavored rice. Instead, it was to address a sad truth. In less developed countries, 500,000 children go blind every year because of a lack of vitamin A. People die as a result. Yet this genetically modified golden rice, which could replace crops local farmers already knew how to grow and tend, could supply enough vitamin A to eliminate the blindness and the deaths. Just 1 cup of golden rice could save thousands of lives of children per day. But golden rice was opposed by activists against genetic modification, and activists invaded and destroyed a field trial in the Philippines. This brings me to my second question. How can GMOs help us decrease the negative impact our food production has on our planet and the environment? First, let me take a second to remind you how enormous our impact really is. The production of food has transformed our planet. Estimates say that human beings currently use about half of the Earth's landmass not covered with ice for our own needs. Half of this is used to support the livestock industry alone. That means we currently use more than a quarter of the Earth's landmass for the production of meat and dairy. For example, clear cutting to make room for livestock and crops is one of the biggest contributors to deforestation, as forests are cleared to create grazing lands. The negative impact continues once the animals inhabit the land. Overgrazing and the trampling of vegetation cause vast soil degradation, with soil being lost in grazing lands at 10 to 40 times the speed of soil renewal. This in turn leads to desertification, as well as the massive destruction of ecosystems, which has contributed to the devastating extinction rates we are currently seeing. The chemicals and antibiotics used in food production can also be dangerous, not only when humans, plants, and animals are directly exposed, but also by finding their way into the soil, into the air, and leaking into the groundwater, contaminating a much-needed resource and making it potentially harmful. The livestock industry is also a major contributor of greenhouse gases, responsible for 18% of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. That means they contribute 40% more greenhouse gases than the global transportation industry. I think taking into account the negative impact the production of food has had on the air, the water, and the land, I think it is clear something needs to be done, especially when we consider how much more food we will need to produce to successfully feed all of the people on Earth. And while I wish organic farming was the answer, as it clearly has positive implications for the health both of us and the planet, it sadly does not diminish our overall impact on the planet. In fact, some studies show it actually increases it. First, considerably more land is required to produce organic meat, dairy, and eggs. In some cases, more than double. This higher land use is associated with greater emissions of harmful substances like ammonia, phosphate equivalents, and carbon dioxide. Further, denied growing promoting antibiotics, organic animals grow more slowly, which leads to higher energy use over the course of their lifetime to produce the same amount of food. However, GMOs can help. For example, again looking at rice, one scientist began looking at how efficiently farmers were able to use their land and found something startling. He says, quote, 70 million farmers have trouble growing rice due to flooding. Although rice grows well in standing water, most rice varieties will die if they're submerged for more than 3 days straight. Flooding is expected to be increasingly problematic as climate change worsens. However, after studying an ancient variety that could withstand 2 weeks of complete submergence, they worked to isolate the gene. While previous species died after being submerged for only 3 days, they successfully created a species that could stay submerged for 17 days. Not only that, it thrived. While better rice may not save the world, I think it illustrates science's ability to help us find solutions to our global food crisis. While I wish I could believe we will all change our behavior, walk to work, recycle perfectly, and never waste another morsel of food knowing how much it costs to produce, I don't think this is what will save us. Sadly, one thing this class has taught me is that changing human behavior is hard. And despite all of us learning how many of our behaviors, including how we eat, affect the environment, I can't help but wonder how many changes to our behavior will have endured a year from now. Instead, I think we need to invent our way out of this. And thus, I leave you with a story. Last summer, at TEDx Martha's Vineyard, a speaker proposed that despite the best intentions of Save the Polar Bear clubs and meat and murder campaigns, looking back, the times where humans have really been able to change their behavior and save nature is when, for whatever reason, we no longer needed it. He illustrated the point in a number of ways, including one involving our local history, the whaling industry. While most of us have heard that whales were extremely threatened by whaling, it's hard to fathom how close we came to eliminating many of their species. By the mid-1800s, we were killing an estimated 650,000 whales per year, with many species hovering close to the edge of extinction. And despite animal rights groups beginning to pop up, the industry was only growing. No amount of Save the Whale newsletters could halt the global, unquenchable thirst for oil. However, in 1857, everything changed. This is due to two factors: the invention of a clean-burning kerosene lamp by Michael Dietz, and the discovery of crude oil in the continental U.S. These two factors had an almost immediate effect on the global energy market, and by the end of the century, the whaling industry was nearly finished, and populations began their slow comeback. We no longer needed whale oil, and thus, we saved the whale. I can only hope that genetic modification can offer us a similar success. I truly do believe that through science we should be able to produce more food using less water, less land, less chemicals, and thus help us meet our global food needs. Thank you very much.